L'kuta Sichos Chelik Yotes Shoftim Gimel Lili Nishmas Rabbi Yosef Ben Yamin Ben Reb Menashe Kaltman. What an amazing Sikha we're going to learn today. We're going to explore the Rambam, where he speaks about the halachas of Navi, of Nevius, and we're going to ultimately uncover the contrast between our emunah in Torah, our emunah in the Navi, and how they contribute one to another. And this will be based on the words of the Rambam, and it will actually lend a whole new understanding in what the Rambam is trying to teach us. So the first half of the Sikha is going to be questions, or is going to be leading us to the Biur. The second half of the Sikha, the Biur. Wegen dem Zivui elav tishmaun herren und folgen an Navi sheyehei b'chol der v'der. With regards to the commandment, which is in this week's parsha Shoftim, to follow, to listen and follow the instructions of the Navi, the prophet, that may be in every generation. Zok the Rambam says, this is in Perek Ches, Halacha Beis, Shekol Navi, Sheyamoid Achar Moshe Rabbeinu. Any Navi that will arise after Moshe Rabbeinu, Ein anu ma'aminim bo mipnei ha'os levadoi. We do not believe in him solely because he produced a sign, a miracle that showed that he was someone special. Ella, and say, because we're going to say because he made a sign, that's why we're going to believe in him. Ella mipnei mitzvah shetziva Moshe b'Torah. Rather, it is because the commandment that Moshe commanded to us in the Torah. V'omar, and said, Im nas nois elav tishmaun. And Moshe says in Torah that if the Navi gives a sign, then you should listen to him. So first we have to understand, what does this mean? What does it mean that we're not listening to him because of the sign, but we're listening to him because the Torah says that if he gives a sign, we should listen to him? The idea that we don't trust a person just because he produces a sign is understood very simply logically. Because a sign could be done through the powers of sorcery or magic. So we don't know for certain if this Navi is a real Navi to begin with. Which according to this we would conclude as ilu yutsuyer given zicher as this is nit belatu bekishuf. Hypothetically speaking, if there was a way to be certain that no sorcery or magic was employed, ubemela there's a Navi emes, and therefore we would know that this Navi is a true Navi. Voltman given mechuyev zu folgen him. We would then be obligated to listen to him. Even without the commandment in Torah to listen to him. Because the words of the prophet are the words of Hashem. So what's the Rambam trying to tell us? That we're not listening to him because of the ice, but we're listening to him because of the mitzvah. We're not listening to him because we don't know if the ice is true. But if we know the ice is true, then why shouldn't we listen to him just because we know that he's speaking the words of Hashem? Is aber. So here's what the Rambam means. Al pi hayodua. According to what we know, with regards to mitzvahs that were given before Matan Torah, that the fact that we fulfill these mitzvahs today is we're doing it because Hashem commanded it to us through Moshe Rabbeinu. Not because the Eibusher spoke to the Nevi'im prior to him. For example, the mitzvah of bris, which was told to Avram Avinu. We don't do the mitzvah because Hashem told Avram to do a bris, and that his children should do the bris. We do the mitzvah because of the mitzvah in Torah. We do it because it's a mitzvah in Torah. Is verstandig, als dat derg says ich bin geet zivuyim, shall God baruch hu durch Nevi'im nach Matan Torah. We could understand and apply the same logic to Nevi'im that came after Matan Torah. As mitzad atzmam haben sie nit in sich dem teikif von mitzvah shetziva b'Sinai, that on their own, without the Torah giving them veracity, they do not have the same level of strength as something that's in the Torah, something that was given at Sinai. In other words, what the Rambam is saying is that you're true, that if this guy is a Navi, you would have to listen to him because it's Dvar Hashem. But nevertheless, it wouldn't have the same strength as a mitzvah from Sinai. But since the Torah says elav tishmaun, the Torah is giving the Navi the takeif, the strength the veracity of it having, as if it, not as if, of it being a mitzvah from Sinai. Ukumuvan, we're going to bring in the brackets, the Rebbe is going to bring an example of an event, namely Matan Torah, that had two aspects to it. Had Oisis Umayvsim, and also had something greater than that. And the reason that we believe in Moshe Rabbeinu and in Matan Torah is not because of the Oisis Umayvsim, but because of something deeper than that. As we can understand from the sounds and flames of fire that were at Matan Torah. And nevertheless, as the Rambam explains here in the beginning of Perek Ches, the Yidden did not believe in Moshe Rabbeinu because there was this light show, these incredible signs that took place. As Davkin Nevuas v'divrei Moshe is a pnei ha'is levadei would not need them take it from Torah, because then it would that would mean that Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah, Moshe Rabbeinu's words are based on a sign, and don't have the strength of Torah. Nor, rather, the Rambam says, "Maimed Har Sinai levada hi araya." The very event of Har Sinai is the proof. Ukimifurish, as it is written explicitly in the pasuk, as durch vos b'chol yaminu leilam, that what caused that Yidden should believe in Moshe Rabbeinu, durch dem vos anochi bo elecha ba'avanon, through the fact that the Eibishter came with Moshe into the thick of the cloud, ba'avur yishma ha'am b'dabri imach, so the people can hear as the Eibishter speaks to Moshe. They saw and heard Moshe as a Navi, Moshe receiving the prophecy of Matan Torah. And that's why we believe in Moshe Rabbeinu. Not because there was a sign, but because we actually saw him being a Navi. We saw it with our own eyes. So what we're seeing from these brackets is that there's two different things. There's experiencing or seeing a Navi in action, and then there's the Navi proving himself through signs and miracles. So when it came to Matan Torah, we didn't believe in Moshe because of the Kailas v'Lapidim, the signs and the miracles. But we believe in Moshe because we watched Moshe be a Navi. Und the Riber is a Rambam Medaik. Now let's go back to this Rambam that we're learning here on the Pasuk Elav Tishmaun. That's why the Rambam specifies Mipnei HaMitzvah Shetziva Moshe B'Torah Elav Tishmaun. Now the reason we listen to the Navi is because Moshe commanded it in the Torah. Well, Zayidik HaMitzvah V'Torah, because since it's a mitzvah in the Torah, Tutes Uf Ateikif Miyuchad. It accomplishes, it gives it an extra strength. Which if there was a commandment that came through a Navi without the veracity of Torah, it wouldn't be the same thing. Until the point that there is a fundamental difference in halacha between the words that come from Torah and the words that come from Nevi'im in various different areas of how they have to be implemented and when they don't have to be implemented. So the Rambam, in Sif Aleph, the Rebbe is telling us that the Rambam is explaining to us that why do we listen to a Navi? We listen to a Navi not because he brought us a sign, because then, even if we knew for sure that the sign was true, the Nevius would only have the strength of a Navi. It would not have the strength of a mitzvah b'Torah. But Ayay said that Torah says they love Tishmon. This gives the Navi Emes, a true Navi, it gives him a taikif, a strength of being a mitzvah b'Torah, and that's why we listen to the Navi. That is the foundation of the Sikha. That is the basic understanding of this Rambam, that the reason we believe in a Navi, when a Navi comes to speak to us, if he brings an ois, the reason why we believe the Navi is because the Torah says Elav Tishmon, and thus gives the Navi a taikif of a mitzvah Shabbat Torah. In Sif Beis, we're going to ask a question, that if this is the Pshat, if this is the Rambam's Shita, then the flow of Perek Ches, of the Rambam where this is discussed, is not fully understood. And let's take it a paragraph at a time. According to this, however, as unser folgen divrei navis mitzadem tzivi atayra, and the fact that we follow the navis because Torah commanded us to do so, unit mitzadem ois far sich, das heißt als atzivi fun navi, and not just because of the sign, which means we're not just listening to him because he's a navi, we're listening to him because a navi, and the Torah tells us to listen to a navi. It's not moving that Hemshech von Perik Ches, it's gonna not be understood to us. The Perik Ches, which is this Perik that we're talking about in the Rambam, Perik Ches of Hilchas Yisei Atera, Vuer is Meidich. With Rambam elaborates, Ados was Eden Dabin geglebt in the Vuas Moshe. The fact that you didn't believe in the Nevuah and the prophecy of Moshe is not because Moshe made miracles, signs. Yes, believe by Daifi, because the Rambam explains that someone who bases his faith on the signs could still have a doubt. It's still not 100% sure because we don't know if the sign was real. No, so there wasn't the signs. But why did the Yidden believe in Moshe Rabbeinu? But Har Sinai, because of the event of Har Sinai, because our eyes saw this, not anybody else, not a stranger, but and our ears heard this, not anybody else. So therefore, the Rambam is explaining to us that the Nevuah of Moshe is true to us because we watched it happen. Something that you saw happen is real. No. Is a Messiah than Pedic, and towards the end of the Pedic, the Rambam says, as the Firach, therefore, if another person came as a Navi and did great miracles and great signs, and then tried to deny the prophecy of Moshe, we don't listen to him. Why? The prophecy of Moshe is not based on the signs, so that we should compare this sign, these signs, to those signs and see which Navi produced greater signs. Ella beinenu rinua ubasnenu shmanua v'chulu. Rather, Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy is true to us because we saw it with our own eyes, and therefore any Navi that comes after it cannot deny the truth of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's not up for discussion. We saw it with our own eyes. That's what the Rambam says. The question that Rebbe is going to ask now is, why does the Rambam have to go into the logic of saying that Moshe Rabbeinu is greater than the other Navi because we saw it with our own eyes? Why can't the Rambam just tell us that since the whole Toikif, the whole strength of the Navi is from Torah, so if he goes up against Torah, he's going up against his own authenticity. He can't deny the authenticity of Torah because Torah is giving him his authenticity. Why can't the Rambam just say that? If that's the pshat and they love Tishmon, that we believe in the Navi because it's a mitzvah shetziva Moshe b'Torah, so therefore anybody who goes against the Torah, so he's Navi, not a Navi anymore. Why does the Rambam have to go into this whole logic as if to say that the whole truth of this Navi is based on the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu, and not so much on the mitzvah shetziva b'Torah? That's what it sounds like the Rambam is saying. Let's see it inside. Take it from the tziviyat Torah love tishmon leitishmel divrei hanavi. The fact that we're listening to following the Navi Emes is because, not the other Navi, is because of the fact that Torah commanded us to listen to this Navi. And when it comes to a false Navi, the Torah tells us don't listen to the false Navi. And we're not listening to this Navi because we are certain that his words are the words of Hashem. We're listening to him because Torah says so. So the Rambam should have written this into the Sefer Hayad, that we're listening. The whole reason we're listening to the Navi is because Torah says so. And the Rebbe is making 2 points. Point number one, which is going to conclude with in a moment, is why doesn't the Rambam say this? Point number two, he's going to say now, is that if you're going into logical arguments, they don't belong in a Sefer of Halachas. They belong in Moreh Nevuchim or other Sfarim that discuss ideology or philosophy. B'chlal, in Sefer Hayad, the Sefer von Halachas, is the earth for Rayis al derech halacha. In Sefer Hayad, which is the Sefer of Halacha, the proofs that the Rambam brings should be halachic proofs. But if you're going to bring logical arguments, why a Navi that tries to deny the Nevuah of Moshe is considered a false prophet, because he's coming trying to deny something that you saw with your own eyes. Fits in more into the Sefer of the Rambam, the Meir Nevuchim, where the Rambam discusses philosophical arguments about the truth of Torah and other truths. So question number one is, why does the Rambam not say the simple detail that you have to listen to the Navi because Torah says so, and therefore you can't deny the truth of Moshe Rabbeinu because that's where the Navi's toikif strength is coming from. Number two, why does the Rambam engage in logical arguments when we're talking a Sefer Ayah, the Sefer of Halachas? And here the Rebbe concludes the question. The Rambam should have said this din very concisely. The fact that we listen, we follow and believe the Navi is it's not because of the sign, but rather it's because the Moshe commanded us to do so in Torah. Even though if we don't know if the sign is true or if it was done through sorcery or magic, nevertheless the Torah tells us that a Navi that does a sign, we believe him. However, if the Navi did major miracles and then tried to deny the Nevuah of Moshe, with this he's denying Torah, which Torah says they love Tishmon, that you have to listen to the Navi because Torah says so. And even if his promises and his signs turn out to be true, you don't listen to him because he's going against the Torah. Why does the Rambam engage in logical arguments and skip out such a basic point? So that's our question. Question Sif Aleph, we explained that the Elav Tishmon gives the Navi the power of a mitzvah shetziva Moshe B'Torah, and then later when he talks about the person that goes up against Moshe Rabbeinu, he doesn't use this argument, this detail to explain why the Navi is a Navi Sheker, and rather he uses a logical argument which seems out of place. If Gimel, we're going to ask another question. This other question that we're going to ask is that in Perek Tes, there's a couple of times where the Rambam discusses a person going up against the Torah, and instead of saying that he's being makrish Torah, he says he's being makrish nevu'osoi shel Moshe. We're going to ask the same question. Why does the Rambam not say that the problem is that he's being makrish Torah? His whole entire authenticity came from Torah. Now he comes to be makrish the Torah. How can we do that? So again, it's a very similar question, which means to say it seems that the Rambam is placing major emphasis on the nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu, and in a way that it's even greater than the fact that the person is going up against Torah, and we're trying to understand why. Nachman, the Perek Shlach, as I get in the Rambam for Inyan Torah B'Chlal with Nevuas Moshe, we find that I'm connecting the whole idea of Torah with the prophecy of Moshe. If someone comes and says that Hashem sent him to introduce a new mitzvah or to take away a mitzvah, or to explain something about a mitzvah, something that we never heard before from Moshe Rabbeinu, for example, say that tefillin have to be pink, or something like that. Or if a person comes and says that those mitzvahs that were given to us through Moshe Rabbeinu were only commanded for that time and they were not given for eternity, Zog the Rambam paskins that this person is a false prophet. Why? Because he is denying the nevuah of Moshe. The same thing happens at the end of Perek Tes Halacha Hey. That a person that comes and says that Hashem commanded him that idols should be worshipped, even if just today or even if just for this moment, as it is he's not a true prophet because he's denying the nevuah of Moshe. Move on. So this again is not understood. Since he is denying not just the nevuah of Moshe, but he's denying a commandment in Torah, the commandment of which we did in last week's parasha today. You should not add on to the Torah. You should not diminish anything from the Torah. Or in Parshat itself, when the Pasuk says that they revealed mitzvahs are for us, for our children forever. So we see Torah tells us that you can't change anything, you can add or take away anything. Torah tells us the mitzvahs are eternal. And this Navi is going against that. The Rambam should have said that the problem with this Navi is that he's denying the Torah, which is its own category, and seemingly much more severe than denying the Nevuah of Moshe. Now see if Aleph as the Tzivuyim Shadei Neviim Kelul Kemuv Nech Nevuah Moshe, ha'obenit and take if Minyuchat from the mitzvah Torah Shabar Sinai, as we explained in Seif Aleph, that the commandments that came through the Neviim, even and including the Nevuah of Moshe, do not have the same strength as something that's in the Torah. So if a person is standing up and to go against the Torah, then it's much worse than going against the Nevuah of Moshe. So the Rambam should have said that the problem with these people is that they're being makrish Torah. And instead the Rambam says that he's being makrish the Nevuah of Moshe. The reason why this is such a question is not just in the wording, or it's also because it seems to imply, it seems to be understood from the Rambam that there's something even more special about Nevuah Shel Moshe than Torah. And that's why that becomes the bigger issue. And we'll see that in the answer, Taka, that's Taka how the Rambam is explaining it to us. But in the question, we're trying to understand why is Nevuah Shel Moshe given more credence than the fact than the Torah itself. Especially based on the fact that we explained that the Torah has a greater taikif, a greater strength than a tzivui that comes, a commandment that comes through Nevi'im. Sif Daled, we're going to try to answer. This last question, why the Rambam uses the words lahakesh nevuah shel Moshe. However, we're going to have to refute that answer. As far as the Rambam, as far as the Rambam lahakesh nevuah shel Moshe, we need lahakesh atera. But after durch dem kommt die Chachas, are ze navi sheker. Mela hat aladin for navi sheker. The reason why the Rambam says that you're being makesh nevuah shel Moshe is because this gives us the proof that he's a Navi Sheker. It's not just a fact that he's a Navi Sheker, but it comes along with a proof. The Rambam is divided in Pfir the Kepere Canal, as the Rambam explained in Perek Ches. As a Yesvid Nevuas Moshe Rabbeinu Einal Piyasis, Ella Beinenu Rinu. The Nevuah of Moshe was not based on signs, but it was based on something that we saw with our own eyes. Kum Tui says, is a Makis Beinacha. So if a person denies the Nevuah of Moshe, then he's denying something that he saw with his own eyes. So the Rambam is trying to explain to us why this is so terrible, what this person is doing. Because he's being makrish something, not just being makrish something that's written in a book, but he's being makrish something that he's denying something that you saw with your own eyes. Just say, if the Rambam was focused primarily on the severity of this prohibition of saying a false prophecy, the person is coming to say that the Eibishter sent him to introduce a new mitzvah, then I would have said that the problem is that he's going against the Torah. But since the Rambam is not just telling us how severe this is, he's explaining to us why it's so terrible. Why is he a false prophet? And why do the dinim of a false prophet apply here? The Rambam says because he's denying something that we saw with our own eyes. But the Torah is a Deicha Gadol. However, this explanation is the Deicha Gadol. Warum? Wie bald das Mevation as der was is makrish nevuah shel Moshe verleken der Sach was Renua und Shmanua makrish atera kemvur Friedrich and Perek. We already know this. We already know from the previous Perek, from Perek Ches, that someone who denies the nevuah of Moshe is denying something that we saw and we heard. So therefore, someone who's makrish Torah is doch mistaber lemer adosed the town von Chaimer Alokas v'dinyan Navi Sheker. So it's understood already that this is the reason why this is so severe and why the dinim of a Navi Sheker applies. And therefore the Rambam could have said in other words, you're trying to explain. The suggested reason was that the Rambam is trying to highlight why this is such a terrible thing. But the Rambam already told it to us. The Rambam Sachakal over here, he's referencing something that was said in the previous Perek. I already know that someone goes up against the Torah is being makrish the nevuah of Moshe, which we saw and which we heard. I already know that. Because the Rambam already explained in the Perek Ches. So over here, where the Rambam is talking about someone going against the Torah, he could have said lahakrish Torah, and I would have understood that the severity of it is based on what was said in the previous Perek. So it still doesn't explain to us why the Rambam chooses to write lahakrish nevuah shel Moshe and not lahakrish Torah. In Sifei, he's going to bring even a greater question. The Tmiya is noch greser. The question is even greater. And the reason why the question is greater, he's going to say in Sifei, is that in one instance, in one halacha, in Perek Tes, the Rambam does use the word lahakresh hatayra. And in something that's very similar to the earlier halacha, where he said, lahakresh nevaseh shel Moshe. Say 1 second. If there is a reason to say lahakresh nevaseh shel Moshe, then why say lahakresh hatayra? If you can get away with lahakresh hatayra, then why over here does it say lahakresh nevaseh shel Moshe? Why is there a difference in the two halachas in the Rambam, which are truly very similar situations? To me, is not going to say. Ik vind in selben Perek, the very same Perek, this is Perek Tes, as we find, as the Rambam nutzt taka the lashon lahakresh hatayra. The Rambam actually does use the term lahakresh hatayra. What does he say? He says, Im akar davar midvarim shalamadnu v'yashmoa. If he uproots something that we heard already from the Eibishter, or he came and he said that he passed in the halacha. Hashem said that this is the halacha. And he's a Navi HaSheker, he's a false prophet. He's coming to deny the truth of Torah. The Torah says that Torah is not in heaven. So if he wants to pass in the halacha based on a nevuah, that's going against the Torah. He's nicht verstanden Geschichte. So now we don't understand this change. But if mitzvah legreya mitzvah mitzvahs levizman hayu when this person wants to add a mitzvah or take away a mitzvah or say that mitzvahs were temporary or he wants to command people to do avodah zarah, he focuses on the fact that the person is denying the nevuah, the prophecy of Moshe. But if he's trying to change a din, not remove it entirely, but just to change a din, or to paskin halacha in the name of nevios. Why is there a change, Nachmer? This question is even stronger. Shas einer sagt, Hashem shlach lefares min mitzvahs pirush leish manu Moshe. If a person wants to give a new explanation in something that we heard from Moshe, the example I gave before is he said tefillin don't have to be black. And on this, the Rambam says that this person is a false prophet because he's denying the nevuah of Moshe. Not only is he going against the Torah, not only is he going against the nevuah of Moshe, but he's actually going against this halacha of Leba Shemayimi. And from that pasuk, a Torah is not in the heaven. We learn that a Navi is not allowed to introduce his own things into Torah. It's the very same pasuk that the person who says, who paskins halacha based on nevuah is doing wrong because he's paskening. And so not only are we asking in the previous paragraph that the Rambam sometimes uses lakish, one time uses lakish hatayra, and the other time uses lakish nevuah. But the two different examples are both transgressing the same pasuk. Leiba Shemayimi. Die bald das beide seine Makrisch demselben pasuk. Is bei Vosdom und Mechalik sein zwischen See und Zogin. Als der sagt, Shashem Shlachi v'chulu l'farish chulu. Is bald the Hachis Moshe Shalmeishas. Why are we differentiating and saying that if the person says that the Eibishter sent him to change something, to give a different explanation in a mitzvah than the way it was told by Moshe Rabbeinu, that's called being makish Moshe Moshe. When there was Hashem tzivah didn't kach, and someone who comes to say that Hashem told me to paskin like this, so not only does the Rambam use two different expressions, but the Rambam is using the two different expressions on the very same transgression. In both cases, the person is transgressing loy b'shamayimi. So why in one place does the Rambam say that the problem is lahakish nevuah shel Moshe, and the other place the Rambam says lahakish haTorah? So very quickly, Sif Aleph, we established that the reason the Navi is the reason why we listen to a Navi is because not just because he brought an ois, but because the Torah tells us that if there's an ois, we should listen to the Navi. This gives the Navi the takeif of a mitzvah Shabbat Torah. Based on that, we ask the question: why is it that when the Rambam speaks of someone who's being makrish nevuah shel Moshe, is denying the nevuah of Moshe, the Rambam doesn't just say that he's being makrish Torah and therefore therefore is a Navi Sheker. Rather, instead of that, the Rambam gives a logical explanation that Moshe Rabbeinu is greater than this Navi because Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevius we saw with our own eyes. Why does the Rambam go into a logical argument and not keep it clear and concise that the person is going against the Torah and therefore is a Navi Sheker? The next question we asked is why in Perek Tes, when it talks about different examples of people that are going against the Torah, does the Rambam not use the word lahakrish HaTorah and instead he uses the word lahakrish nevuasei shel Moshe? What is it about nevuasei shel Moshe that seems that is even a greater infraction than lahakrish HaTorah? And then we asked the question, why even after a couple of times that the Rambam uses the term lahakrish nevuasei shel Moshe, does in one instance does the Rambam use the term lahakrish HaTorah, and in an instance that seems to be transgressing the very same halacha, which earlier the Rambam said lahakrish nevuasei shel Moshe, and here he says lahakrish HaTorah. So we basically have to understand what is the nevuasei shel Moshe's impact on Torah. That because of that, the Rambam expresses that nevuasei shel Moshe as the problem of that makes this person into a Navi Sheker. Before we go to the answer, the biur of the Sikha in Sivav and Zayin, the Rebbe is going to suggest an answer on about the where the Rambam says that if someone says to do sort of avodah zarah, hareza bo lahachish nevuasei shel Moshe. We tried to answer the question. We're going to refute the answer. It's actually a very, very interesting answer that brings up a very interesting aspect in halacha. The fact that by the very last halacha, referring to someone who's serving avodah zarah, who the Navi says that we should serve avodah zarah, the Rambam uses the term lahachish nevuasei shel Moshe. We could maybe answer this following in Chedek and Mevaris, then we may be able to explain this by first prefacing was State in Sifri Yafim Pasuk. That by prefacing that which it says in the Sifri on the Pasuk, V'diber Aleim, the Navi should speak to them, Sheloi Lahoshev ha Turguman, not to employ, not to place an interpreter. Interpreter could mean either someone who's translating. In this case, it means someone who should speak out loud. Sometimes the Navi doesn't have a loud voice. So they can hire someone that should speak out louder, so everyone could hear the words of the Navi. So that Sifri says, from the fact that it says V'diber Aleim, the Navi should speak to them, this teaches us that they shouldn't have someone else to speak in place of the Navi. And according to this, we would conclude, as their din for no'ever al divrei Navi chayiv misa b'dei shamayim, that this din, that if somebody transgresses the words of a Navi, he is chayiv, he is liable for misa b'dei shamayim, death by heaven, is dafkiv and inheritance mepiya Navi atzmei. That din would apply only if the person heard the words from the Navi himself. Not if he hears it through the interpreter. Because since the mitzvah of V'diber Aleim is that you should hear it from the Navi himself, so you can only transgress that if you heard it from the Navi. If you heard it through the interpreter or through the loud speaker, then that would not be considered being over al divrei hanavi. Und der Rogatchover is meistens in them. The Rogatchover adds to this as a feel when heard to be a Navi atzmai, even if the person hears the nevuah, the prophecy from the Navi himself, is the chiyuv dafkiv and herhetis for Navi be'eshen is nabe. The chiyuv of misa b'dei shamayim for someone who transgresses the words of the Navi is only if he hears it from the Navi in the time, during the time that he is receiving the prophecy. But if the Navi received the prophecy from the Eibishter at a certain time, and later the Navi relayed this to the person, after he received the prophecy, it's as if he would have heard it from an interpreter. It's not considered hearing it from the Navi himself, and therefore he wouldn't be chayiv misa b'dei shamayim for being over, for transgressing the words of the Navi. So this is a separate idea, that in order for a person to transgress listening to the words of a Navi, you have to hear it from the Navi in the moment that he is receiving the prophecy. A piece of what we can talk. So based on this, we could say as follows: that in the generation of Moshe, if someone went and transgressed a mitzvah that he heard directly from Moshe, he's doing the machilik. Zier is over of mitzvahs avodah zarah, or of andere mitzvahs. He would make a difference whether the mitzvah that he's transgressing is the mitzvah of avodah zarah, of idol worship, or if it's a different mitzvah. Why would it make a difference? By mitzvahs avodah zarah, since the first two dibros were following here the approach that the first two dibros they heard from Moshe in the moment of Nevuah, and then Moshe came down off the mountain and taught them the other 8 dibros. But the first two dibros they heard from Moshe as he was receiving the Nevuah. So if somebody transgresses and worships avodah zarah after hearing it from Moshe be'ez shemisnabe, not only is it a problem of avodah zarah, it is also a problem of being over al divrei hanavi, transgressing the words of a navi. Mashenki ba'andere mitzvahs, v'baldas ben atzegert from Moshe nachtam v'yatzegert me'akadosh baruch hu. Whereas other mitzvahs, which were heard from Moshe Rabbeinu only later after he heard it from Hashem, is nita bazei oich b'deiris al Moshe l'chiv v'never al divrei hanavi. So by them, even during Moshe's generation, it would not be applicable, this liability that he's being over al divrei hanavi, because it wasn't heard from Moshe directly in the moment of Nevuah. So let's make sure we follow based on what the Rogatchover teaches, that you have that over al divrei hanavi means over al divrei hanavi be'eshem isnabe, while he is saying Nevuah. So then, if somebody is in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu's generation, and he's over on avodah zarah, not only is he over on the Isra of avodah zarah, which is an Isra min HaTorah, he is also being over on Divrei HaNavi, he's also transgressing the words of a Navi, which the Navi heard, which he heard from the Navi, Be'eshem Isnabe, while he was receiving the prophecy. Now let's go back to the Rambam. And based on this, we can explain the change, the difference in the lashon of the Rambam. As the far zakta by avodah zarah lahachis nevuos shel Moshe. That's why by avodah zarah, that the Navi comes and says that we should worship avodah zarah, he says he's being machis nevuos shel Moshe. So the Rambam wants to allude to the fact, as in the Tzivui from Moshe avodah zarah, that in Moshe's command not to worship idols is faran noch an inyam yuchad. There's another idea, another element. But no, says to them a tzivui from Torah v'yal tzivui. In addition to the fact that it's a commandment of Torah, like any other commandment, and you have to listen to it. The Hainu, what's this extra element? Plus, das is a geder from tzivui anavi be'eshem isnabe. It goes into the category of the commandment of a prophet during the moment of prophecy. Uvanim, it said is and therefore, if a person transgresses this during the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, someone who actually heard it from Moshe Rabbeinu directly, he is also chayiv misa b'dei shemayim. We bow that their din is not b'avodah zarah kanal. Since this din is only applicable b'avodah zarah, as we explained in the previous column, because only avodah zarah did the Eibush to the Yidden hear from Moshe Rabbeinu be'ez shem isnabe in the moment of prophecy. Therefore, zaktas the Rambam. No, but again, so then Therefore the Rambam only writes it with regards to the person who comes and says that Hashem commanded us to worship avodah zarah, because he's telling you that not only are you going against the Torah, but you're also being over al divrei hanavi. You're transgressing the words of a navi. But by in halacha daled, by someone who wants to change something that's in the Torah, it's because there's no issue of being over al divrei hanavi. That's not an issue, because those mitzvahs were heard only later, and as the Rogatchover explained, then in that case, over al divrei hanavi doesn't apply. So maybe we can explain, according to this, why by the person, the alleged navi, that tells people to worship avodah zarah, the Rambam uses the word lahakish nevuos shel Moshe to reference the idea that there's also a problem of being over al divrei hanavi. Sif Zayin is going to refute this entirely. But at nidvek and avodah zarah zog the Rambam lahakish nevuos shel Moshe. Number one, before we even discuss this answer, we have to recognize that in the beginning of the Perek test, the Rambam, when it says if someone wants to add a new mitzvah or take away a mitzvah, etc., wants to say the mitzvahs are temporary, the Rambam says that he's being lakish nevuos shel Moshe, and that wouldn't be answered by this, because this whole answer is based on specifically Avodah Zarah. So besides the fact that this doesn't really answer our question, it only answers half the question, the Avodah Zarah part, is echt the Klolos Abiyur. But in addition to that, this whole explanation, as mit Lashon Lahachis Nevaseh Shel Moshe, Mein Deram Tzum Ramazan Dem Chiyuv Mitzvah Yishmayim B'Dei Shel Moshe, that these words Lahachis Nevaseh Shel Moshe are actually referencing or alluding to the Chiyuv Mitzvah B'Dei Shemayim of being over al Divrei Hanavi. Adeicha Gadol, this explanation is a very difficult thing to understand. Vile. For two reasons. Aleph, the Baldas Din Anal is blazed B'Dei Shel Moshe. He's like, my Dava. First of all, this din was in the time of it only applies was only applicable in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. So my Dava, what happened? Not relevant anymore. See base? A question base. The Chiyuv Mitzvah Shemayim Ba'Avodah Zarah B'Dei Midbar is the Fiyah now lit verbunden mit Dinyan von Aviyah Sheker. If you think about this a step deeper, this isn't connected to false prophecy. No, mit Dinyan von Aviyah Zarah. It's a element in the Aveda of idol worship. When Imitz von der Midbar dint Aveda Zarah, ich wenn sagt nicht bei Hashem Tzivo, he's a Chayv Mitzvah Shemayim. According to this reasoning, if somebody was to serve Aveda Zarah during the Deira Midbar, during the Deira of Moshe, without a Navi coming to tell him to serve, or without a Navi saying that you should serve Avodah Zarah. Person woke up one morning and decided to serve Avodah Zarah. It also has the problem of Ever al Divrei Hanavi, because he heard from Moshe and now he's going and he's serving idols. He's Ev the Rambam Gewalt mit Ramaz and the Din Anal, so the Rambam wants to allude to this detail, despite the fact of my Dahava, despite the fact that it's in the past. But the Rambam wanted, for some reason, he mentions in the Hara that maybe when Mashiach comes, it'll be applicable to that dirt once they come back to life. So the Rambam wants to maybe mention this din. It belongs in the Avodah Zarah. We need beim din from the Via Sheker. It doesn't belong by Navi Sheker, which the Rambam was discussing here, because it's not a Navi issue. It's a Avodah Zarah issue. Anybody that serves Avodah Zarah, B'Dei Shel Moshe, is being over al Divrei Hanavi. So therefore, this explanation it was refuted. We can't say that the reason why the Rambam is telling us Moshe is to allude to the issue of Over al Divrei Hanavi. First of all, it doesn't answer the first time the Rambam mentions Moshe. Second of all, my Dahava Hava. Third of all, if the Rambam wanted to talk about this, he would talk about it in Hilchas Avodah Zarah, and it doesn't really belong in Hilchas the halachas discussing a Navi. Now in Sivches, we're going to get to the beer. We waited long enough. Now comes the beer. And what we're going to do in the beer is we're going to actually explain that Nevuasei Shel Moshe actually lends veracity to Torah. Until now, we were under the impression that Torah gives veracity to the Navi. Now he's going to explain to us, the Nekudas HaBeer is going to be that Nevuah of Moshe actually gives back veracity to Torah. And therefore, the Rambam says, L'Hakas Nevuah Shel Moshe, because that's where the emes of Torah reaches, how the emes of Torah reaches us, and he's going to explain this in a very beautiful way by explaining that there's a Maila in Torah and there's a Maila in Nevuah, and they're going to contribute to each other, and that's why the Rambam writes it the way he writes it, and it's Negea Lahalocha in the way that Rambam teaches it us. Let's start Sifches. When das Alts verstehen, behaktem den Bier, bekitzer al kaponim, we'll understand all of this by first introducing the explanation, bekitzer al kaponim, at least briefly, in dem was men germant frier, and the fact that was mentioned earlier, Sif Aleph, that in dem Geder Bahalocha, ube Pardes HaTeira Bechlal, und der Meile von Mitzvahs HaTeira Bahar Sinai, after Tzivuyim Shal Yedei HaNeviim, which we spoke about, how in Halacha, there is a Meile, there is an advantage to Mitzvahs in Torah, those that were given at Har Sinai, over commandments that come through Nevi'im, which is what we explained in Sif Aleph, that something that's in Torah has a greater taikif, a greater strength than that which is it comes through a Navi. Why is that? On the word Anochi, which is the first word of the Seres Dibris, Klalos Klateira, which the Seres Dibris contains the entire Torah. Zog di Gemara as Anochi is Rashtevis Anon Nafshi Ksavis Yahavis. The word Anochi is an acronym for Anon Nafshi Ksavis Yahavis. Literally means I myself, I wrote and I inserted, I gave. As the Eibishter had sich Kivyachal reingeschrieben, reingegeben in the Torah, the Eibishter wrote himself and gave himself into the Torah, placed himself in the Torah. That the Torah is not just the words of Hashem, but the Torah is Hashem Himself. Ubemedrash, or to use the words of the Medrash, as durch Torah, through Torah is Oisi atem loichim. You have me, you take me, you are able to have the Eibishter. But the far is move on. So this is the Kudah number one, that the Torah is Anar Nafsik Savas Yavis. The Torah contains the Eibishter Himself. The Kudah number two, second point, was the far is move on as the mitzvahs Torah and nitner am mittel zu Kabbalah Schar. Therefore, it's understood that the mitzvahs and Torah are not just a means, a conduit to receiving reward, other to the Grechen der Meile v'iluf and Sgula v'gemer Mamlachas Keren v'gekadosh, or to receive, to reach the level of being the treasure of the Eibishter, or the kingdom of Koyanim, or the holy nation which we can reach through Torah, or the Tzara v'Sabriyas, or as the Medrash says, the Eibishter gave us the mitzvahs to refine the creations. This is not the ultimate goal of mitzvahs. To be a means to an end of becoming a better person, of reaching closer to Hashem, or receiving a reward. The mitzvahs are the end. The mitzvahs are the ultimate goal and purpose. To do the mitzvah. And explains it a little bit better in the brackets. Just so you can't say about Hashem that He is, God forbid, a means, a conduit to something else. Same way, you can't say that about the mitzvahs of Torah because they contain the Eibishter. So if the Eibishter is not a means to an end, then the mitzvahs are not a means to an end. This actually explains something which was discussed in the Rambam, that a person can't say the Torah is not eternal, because it says that the mitzvah that the mitzvahs are forever. And you can't say that anything will change, will be added, or will be taken away, which was one of the suggestions of the Navi, which we concluded is a Navi Sheker, because it's not possible to change anything in Torah. But now we understand why. Since the Torah mitzvahs contain the essence of Hashem, so there can't be any change. Just like the Eibishter is unchanging, so to the mitzvahs of the Torah, which are the Eibishter or contain the Eibishter, also are unchanging. In other words, then the lift the purpose of the Eibishter's desire in giving us mitzvahs was for us to receive reward or to reach a certain level. Then it would make sense to say that if the fulfillers of the mitzvahs, if the people change, then there would be a change in the mitzvahs. For example, if they reach the level, then maybe he doesn't have to do the mitzvah anymore, because the whole purpose was to reach a level, and he reached the level. Since, however, the Eibishter's desire is something that is a core desire, not for any azay vila mitzvah, and that's what the Eibishter wants, and for no other reason. So the Eibishter doesn't change, then nothing can change, and then the Torah mitzvah doesn't change. Now derech zeh is the Meile von Torah of Nevuah, and this will, similar to this, we'll understand the advantage of Torah over Nevuah. When a Navi gives an instruction, go to a certain place, don't go to a certain place, that is they're said for the benefit that comes from it. And therefore, they are temporary commands, because once the benefit was reached, the commandment is not relevant anymore. Even commandments that come from a prophet, that are commanding us to keep the words of Torah and not to transgress the words of Torah. For example, this pasuk from the Navi Malachi, remember the Torah of Moshe, is there gufa. They're also a means to an end. They're also for the benefit. They're commanding us to listen to the Torah. So listening to the Torah is taka, not a means to an end. But the commandment from the Navi to listen to the Torah is a means to an end. Is listening to the words of Torah. And therefore, hypothetically speaking, if a person was to zichru Torah, to do what the Navi said, then the Navi's instruction becomes irrelevant. So, in other words, to explain the Maila of Torah over Nevuah, Nevuah is a means to an end, and therefore it's temporary. However, the words of Torah primarily are they themselves the will of the Eibishter. There is the Eibishter's core desire, and therefore there's no change, and it's eternal. This is also the reason why a Navi is not allowed to introduce anything into the Torah. Because the words of Hashem that are in the Torah are greater than the words of Hashem that are in the Nevuah. As we just explained, the words of the Eibishter in the Torah are not nafshi, are the Ratzon Ha'atzmi of the Eibishter, and are not capable of change and are eternal. In the words of the Dvar Havaya, the words of Hashem in the Nevuah are for a specific purpose, and therefore it is not eternal, and it could change. So we understand now, based on Tzif Ches, what is so special and what is so unique about the Dvar Havaya, the words of Hashem in Torah. In Tzif Tes, he's going to go the other direction. What about Nevuah? Avapi has to take it from Torah, is going to take it from Nevuah, even though the strength of Torah is greater than the strength of Nevuah. And specifically Torah stands forever and forever. For that reason alone, for that reason itself, there will be an advantage to the words of a Navi over the words of Torah with regards to the creation to people. About Torah is that not is the hecher ben arech von Gad and Nivroim. Since Torah is the core desire of the Eibishter, therefore it is immeasurably higher than the parameters of the creations of Hashem. As they should be able to grasp and understand the very etzem, the very core of Torah. It's impossible. Torah is the Eibishter himself, and for us Nivroim, for us creations, it's very difficult to grasp the Eibishter himself. Shaking Nevuah. However, Nevuah, which is the revelation of godliness to the creations, Gila Soida, is revealing his secrets to people, is Zeir Geder than the words of the Navi. If the conditions are met, that the Navi is fit to be a Navi, for example, he's wise and strong, etc. He does in Anefin as these gallows paled by Eden Lemata Atekif Amunah Nelukus. This could actually affect to strengthen the Amunah and the Eibishter by the Yid. The words of the Torah are beyond him, and therefore, even though when a Yid does a mitzvah, he's grasping the Eibishter. When a Yid learns Torah, he's grasping the Eibishter. But it doesn't necessarily change anything in his external appreciation or understanding of Elokus. But when a Yid hears a Nevuah, when a Yid knows that a Nevuah is true, the Nevuah was conveyed in a way that he should be able to appreciate it. And therefore it changes and strengthens his faith in the Eibishter, because he's seeing a Nevuah happen, a Nevuah that he could access, a Nevuah that he could appreciate. So now we have a Maila in Torah, Anon Nafshi, it's the etzem of the Eibishter, it's the Ratzon Ha'atzmi of the Eibishter. We have a Maila in Nevuah, that it's his Galus Elokus to Nivroim, the revelation of Elokus to creations, to people. And therefore, it's something that affects the person much more deeply, and it strengthens his Amunah in the Eibishter. Now we're going to use this to go back to the Rambam. Or basically going to be saying that it's through the Nevuah of Moshe that our faith in Torah becomes strengthened. And that's going to be why the Rambam uses that term, Lahachas Nevuah Shel Moshe. But it's more than that. And the Rebbe is going to explain that it's actually the way the Rambam speaks, is not speaking it philosophically. The Rambam is speaking as a halacha in Torah. Says, moving the Riches Abir in Rambam. Therefore, now we understand why the Rambam elaborates in Perek Ches with regards to the Amunah of Yidden in the Nevuah of Moshe, and the Torah of Moshe. But does it need but it's not just a story; it's actually a halacha. Un in der halacha and the zwei yanim, this halacha contains two components. Aleph as the emunah was I daf of labor in the voice measure that I betake of ados. An emunah shlema shein b'deifi. Number one, the emunah that a yid has in the nevuah of Moshe has to be with complete certainty, without any a complete emunah, without any doubt. Beis b'chtei as the emunah soll sein beifend because there sie sein nit mit der Eises nur mit Zadem was in der Rove Chulu was neinu shamu, in order that the emunah should be in such a manner that it is with complete certainty, without any doubt, has to come from the fact that we saw it with our own eyes, we heard it with our own ears. Only then can it be a complete faith without any doubt. That's number one. This is what the Rambam discusses in Perek Ches Halacha Aleph, that the nevuah of Moshe, which in the lashon of the Rambam, Halacha Beis, Halacha Gimel. Fish nevuas Moshe Rabbeinu ein al pi ha'osis, kidei shenarech ha'osis zeh le'osis zeh, ela beinenu ri'nuah b'znenu shmanu l'k'beish ha'shamahu. So the Rambam is explaining to us not only that the fact that we have to have emunah in nevuas Moshe, but also the fact that the emunah in nevuas Moshe has to be because of the fact that we saw it and heard it, and therefore there's no doubt in our mind. Now that says it's been given was the Rambam is masbir, for was man darf nicht glauben und nicht folgen an Navi was is bala hakes Moshe Moshe. And this explains why when the Rambam explains to us why we should not believe and not follow the Navi that comes to deny the nevuah of Moshe. I feel of an advised Eisus Meivis Mugdalim even when he shows great signs and miracles. On the nevuah Moshe Rabbeinu eina al pia Eisus, because the nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu is not based on miracles or signs, so we should compare signs to signs. We saw it with our own eyes, we heard it with our own ears. This prophet wants to deny something that you saw with your own eyes. And this is and our question was, why is the Rama bringing in logical reasons? So he says, no, he's not just bringing an explanation why we shouldn't listen to him. No, the halacha. The Rambam is introducing to us another part, an element of the halacha. And this also contains two components. Aleph, the taking of ados and the emunah of zayin al-kedekach. The complete certainty in our faith has to be so strong that even if somebody brings greater miracles and greater signs, credible things, it should not plant any doubt in that faith. In other words, the beginning of the Perek, it was Perek Ches. It was Perek Halacha Aleph. It was in the beginning of the Perek and Halacha Aleph, the Rambam is going in the positive. You have to have the emunah in Moshe, and you have to have the emunah in Moshe in such complete certainty because you saw it and you heard it. Then in Perek Gimel, he goes to the other thing, that you can't uproot that faith. You can't fight that faith. You can't place any doubt in that faith. Even if someone brings greater miracles. Base. In order that this emunah should not become weakened through the other person's miracles and signs, this is able to be reached when a yid explains to himself. This is denying, this is contradicting the nevuah of Moshe which we saw and we heard. Even miracles do not have the ability to plant doubt in something that you saw with your own eyes. Das heißt, as the shleimus, der teikif amuchel von ein shemen, this means that the complete certainty of us not listening to him is mitzadem, das is ba lahachas nvasas meisher inu b'shashemanu. It's coming from the fact that he's denying something that we saw and we heard. So it's not an explanation that just to say, Moshe is greater than. Saying like this, he's saying the halacha is that no one should be able to deny, no one should be able to plant doubt in your absolute faith in Moshe Rabbeinu, and the way you reach that is by remembering, by explaining to yourself that this is something that you saw with your own eyes, you experienced it, and therefore it's real. And I don't know if maybe It's to add a nakuda. The Rambam is telling us that Nevuasei Shel Moshe is what we need in order to make the Torah real to us. Because the Nevuasei Shel Moshe is something Sherinu V'Sheshamanua. We saw it, we heard it. So like we said before in the beginning of Siftes, that emunah, that nevuah has a greater impact on us sometimes because of the fact that it's for Nivraim. Therefore, the nevuah of Moshe is so real to us that it makes the Torah true to us. That's the nekuda of the answer. The nekuda of the answer that the Rambam is teaching us, that the reason why we believe in the Torah is because of the fact that the nevuah of Moshe was me'amis. It authenticated the Torah, as he's going to say in Sif Yud Aleph. Before we get to Sif Yud Aleph, let's look at Sif Yud. Just to show you within halacha an example where you see that the idea of something that you saw with your own eyes has a whole nother level of authenticity. Ein eid nasa dayan. A witness cannot become a judge. But since he saw with his own eyes, is there taikif sheilel di meglichkeit von v'hitzilu. The strength of what he saw takes away from him the ability to save, for the judge to save the defendant. In other words, the job of the judge is v'shaftu eida v'hitzilu eida. They should try to save him. They should try to justify. They should try to find a reason that he shouldn't be guilty. But if a person saw something, it becomes very difficult for him to think anything else. Because beinenu ra'inu, something that he saw with his own eyes is so true, is so real, that all of a sudden now to start doubting what he saw, to start finding excuses for what he saw, becomes very hard. And therefore, once he saw it, he can't become a dayan. But if it was something that he only heard with his own ears, even from 100 Eidim, still doesn't have the same power, the same impact on the person as something that he saw with his own eyes. And therefore, when we realize that we saw Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah, beinenu ra'inu, it becomes so real that nothing could uproot it. V'yesh leimar, as der Tam Pnimi für was der Eibishter hat die Nevuas Moshe ma'ames given in an Eifen von Enenu Ro Dafke b'Mayim Har Sinai. And the deeper reason why the Eibishter authenticated the Nevuah of Moshe at Mayim Har Sinai, wie der Rambam is meilig bazeh, is that the Tachlis von Nevuas Moshe is to peil sein bei Eden, as bei Eden soll der Herred werden. Nicht nur der Emes Havayir Likim von Elokus Bichlal, der Richter Emes von Teire. Was is mitzad Atzmacher von Geden Nivraim? Why did the Eibishter authenticate Moshe's Nevuah at Har Sinai? So that way we should know that not only should it inspire us, or we should be able to internalize the truth of Hashem, but we should internalize the truth of Torah. Durch dem, was Enenu Ro, was Enenu Shamar Voshe Shal Moshe, haben die Emunah Shleima Shein B'Defi Eichad Remes von Torah Shel Mayim Nevuah. What? Because we saw the Nevuah of Moshe. When did we see the Nevuah of Moshe? At Mayim Har Sinai. The Nevuah of Moshe, which has become so real to us, there's absolutely no doubt involved, it also authenticates for us the truth of Torah, because it happened when the Torah was being given. Before we go weiter, in the brackets, he says something beautiful. He says that Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevuah has two extremes. On the one hand, it has the extreme that it's the highest level of Nevuah. On the other hand, it didn't change anything in Moshe's Gashmias. It was present in this physical world, and therefore Dafke Nevuas Moshe, more than any other Navi, is able to have this, is able to authenticate Torah for us, which Torah on the one hand is higher than Nevuah, but on the other hand the Nevuah authenticates Torah and brings it down to us. It has those two extremes, as does Nevuas Moshe. Das was der Teikif Amunah in Torah is Dafke durch Nevuas Moshe. The fact that the strengthening of our faith in Torah is brought to us through the Nevuah of Moshe. Is the fact about Zayin Nevuah is Ma'alev Madrega Achi Gdeilu Sheben Nevuah, because Moshe's Nevuah is at the highest level of Nevuah, unin Beidik Tzavis, on two extremes. Simon to the Gilead Nevuah was the Izgalas Ulukus in the Mechst Neifen, both on the level of the revelation. That it was the highest level of revelation. It was something that was seen very clearly, and not through riddles and through things that had to be understood from something else. But on the other hand, Moshe remained standing in his place, complete. The says that this Gala given to him via Lamata Shalom Mamish was revealed to him as he was in this world as a regular, complete person. When the Riber is ein Nevuah Keli, therefore his Nevuah is the proper conduit to Haraptrag and Teira Shalamaylim and Nivraim in Gedra and Nivraim to bring down Teira that is really higher than the parameters of the creations, to bring it down into the world of creation, and to accomplish by them the absolute certain belief and authentication of Torah. So we're beginning to get a picture of what the Rambam was trying to do over here. The Rambam was trying to explain to us, number one, the halacha, that we have to have emunah in Moshe Rabbeinu. Number two, the halacha that we're not allowed to let anything change that emunah in Moshe. How do we reach that? By realizing that the nevuah of Moshe is something that we actually experienced with our own eyes, and therefore it has the strongest possible authenticity, greater than any navi that could bring any kind of miracles. And what this does for us is this authenticates Torah to us. This has the advantage that through the nevuah of Moshe, it helps us understand that Torah is real. Because since the nevuah of Moshe is real, and the nevuah of Moshe happened at Har Sinai, it makes the Har Sinai by itself could have been beyond our reach, beyond our grasp. But through the nevuah of Moshe happening at Ma'amad Har Sinai, it helps us believe in the Dvar Havaya, in the words of Hashem that are in Torah. And that's why the Rambam doesn't just say Lahakish HaTorah in Perik Ches, where someone is being makish Nevasa Shel Moshe, just to say, well, he's missing out on the Elav Tishmon. In our question, the authenticity of the Navi was based on the authenticity of Torah. And therefore, our question was, just say he's being makish Torah. But now we understand that while the authenticity of the Navi is coming from Torah, the authenticity of Torah, is coming from the Nevuas Moshe. And therefore the Rambam has to elaborate on this to understand why the Torah, what the problem is. The problem is that Moshe's Nevuah is so real and so true, and that's why the Navi who goes up against him is a Navi Sheker. Because since his whole authenticity is coming from Torah, but the authenticity of Torah is coming from the nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu. Therefore, if you bala hakas nevasa shel Moshe, there's a problem, and you're a navi sheker. Now let's go to Perek Tes, where the Rambam uses the term lahakish hatayra, lahakish nevasa shel Moshe, and we wondered why the Rambam doesn't use the term lahakish hatayra. Excuse me. The says that is makish the mitzvah Torah. Shraib the Rambam the Lashon is the Navi Sheker. Shari balakis Moshe Moshe. This will explain to us why in the following Perek Tes. When the Rambam is speaking about somebody who says that the Eibusher sent him to add another mitzvah, to take away another mitzvah, which means he's going up against the truth, the authenticity of Torah. The Rambam says the Lashon that he's a false prophet because he's denying the nevuah of Moshe. This is why. This is there's a Navi Sheker. It's not just a proof that he's a false prophet because he's going against the nevuah of Moshe. No, their meat is the Rambam Mechadesh Nocha Halacha. The Rambam is introducing another halacha. Choch as nevuas Moshe is lemata from Torah, even though the nevuah of Moshe is lower than Torah. Vibaldo, but as nevuas Moshe is me'amis the emunah in Torah. But since the nevuah of Moshe is authenticating the emunah in Torah, there's no change, and you cannot introduce anything new. The Riber darf euch der Teike von Shlilas HaKchosha nicht zuhören sich zum Eisu Meifis kommen darf mit Zaten nevuas Shel Moshe. Therefore, the extreme denial in this and not believing this Navi has to also come because of the nevuah of Moshe. In other words, what this person is doing is he's going up against the Torah. He's denying, this person is denying the truth of Torah. So if I said Torah, it would be true. But the Rambam is telling us something else. The Rambam is telling us that the same absolute certainty and the same thing that we said with regards to the nevuah of Moshe, that you can't allow any oisus or moivsim to deny the truth of Moshe Rabbeinu. The same thing has to be to the truth of Torah. That same authenticity, that same strength of not believing in someone who wants to go against Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah, we has to be with regards to someone who wants to go against Torah. So the Rambam is saying that this person who's going up against the Torah, the problem is not just that he's going against the Torah. The problem is that the halacha tells us that we cannot listen to him with the same intensity as someone who would be going up against the nevuah of Moshe, which we saw with our own eyes, as the Rambam explained in Perek Ches. That's impossible to go up against because we experience by ourselves. Same thing would apply to Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah is going against Torah, going against the whole premise of Torah, the faith in the Eibishter. And therefore, he says, he's going up against the nevuah of Moshe, that if someone says that we should serve Avodah Zarah, not only do we have to deny him, do we have to not accept him because he's a Navi Sheker, why is he a Navi Sheker? Because he's going against Nevuah Shel Moshe. We have to uproot it with the same intensity as uprooting someone or something that's going up against the Nevuah of Moshe. What still remains to be answered is why, when it comes to Akar Din, the person that wants to uproot a specific din in Torah, or wants to paskin a halacha based on a nevuah, over there the Rambam says la'akresh Torah. That still has to be answered. That will be discussed in Seif Yud Gimel. Before we get there, in Seif Yud Beis, the Rebbe is going to summarize, so to speak, and organize, explain to us how the Rambam organized these three prakim: Perek Zayin, Perek Ches, and Perek Tes. Based on this explanation, that in Perek Ches the Rambam is talking about the authenticity of Moshe's nevuah, and in Perek Tes the Rambam is talking about the fact that the authenticity of our belief in Torah is based on the nevuah of Moshe. Now we understand the order of how the Rambam organizes the prakim in Hilchos Seder Torah. Perek Zayin, which we didn't discuss really in the Sikha, read the Rambam beginning in nevuah b'chlal. Perek Zayin the Rambam discusses the concept of nevuah. And also how the nevuah of Moshe has in it is the greatest level of nevuah. Moshe was standing, and other nevuim were not. There's a bunch of details. The details of why Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah is greater. Now, as a follow-up to the greatness, the great level of Moshe's nevuah, is a mamshech in the Perek Shlachar as he continues in Perek Ches. As mitzad dem is done noch a hecheket in the nevuah Moshe. There's another greatness to nevuah Moshe. Was the nevuah is an anefim from the Rinu b'Shemaynu. That Moshe's nevuah was something that we saw and we heard. So not only is Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah greater because of the way it was passed down, the way it was done, the way it was experienced, which was explained in Perek Zayin. There's another advantage to Nevuas Moshe, that we that we saw it, that we experienced it, and therefore it's the most real thing that exists. As Nevuas Moshe is verbunden with Ma'amad Sinai. But now that you tell me that the Nevuah of Moshe is connected to Ma'amad Sinai, Zogt in the Vaydik in Perek, now he says in Perek Tes, as mitzadem is Nevuas Moshe, Ma'ames Echti Emunah and Mitzad Teresh and Ma'alim Nevuah. That because of this, Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah could authenticate our faith, our emunah in Torah, which is higher than nevuah. Thus, was Torah is a medes leilam leilam. We ain't navi rash lachadish davar. The fact that Torah is forever, the fact that a navi cannot introduce anything new to the Torah. But melee by navi kum to zok shavai shlach leis mitzvah is a machas rosh Moshe. And therefore, since Moshe's nevuah is ma'ames, it's authenticating Torah, if somebody comes up against it and rises up against the truth of Torah, he's going against the nevuah of Moshe, which authenticated the Torah. Amazing. Aber, Seif Yud Gimel is going to explain the last question, why in this person who's akar davar, or wants to paskin a din, does he use the term la'akresh Torah? Based on what we explained. If someone goes up against the Torah, he's being machas nevuah Shel Moshe, because nevuah Shel Moshe was ma'ames, authenticated Torah. So he's going to explain. Oh, but the last machas nevuah Shel Moshe tribe that I'm a believer that gets on Navi. This term la'akresh nevuah Shel Moshe, that Rambam writes it with regards to a Navi that says that Hashem sent him to Adam mitzvah. Or someone who says that they should serve with chavim. Shaking in the Falvan Akar Davim Dvarim Shalamadnu Piyashmua, but if he wants to just uproot one thing that we learned in the name of Hashem, Oisha Amar Chulu Shavai Tzivul Shadin Kach, or he wants to paskin halacha, Zokte Nit Lakas Navas Hashem Lakas HaTorah. Over there, he doesn't use the term Lakas Navas Hashem after this whole explanation that Nahachis Navas Hashem is helping us understand the authenticity of Torah. All of a sudden, the Rambam uses Lakas HaTorah, the beard in them. Shas Anavi Zak Shavai Shlach Ilahesif Mitzvah Ilegrea V'Chulu Ilafaris Mitzvah Minamitzvah Spiritual Shemanu Mimoshe. When a Navi wants to send, who says that Hashem sent him to add a new mitzvah, to take away a mitzvah, or to say something that we did not hear from Moshe Rabbeinu. Certainly, if he says to serve Avodah Zarah, he's the mechuvim von sein Dibur zu Makkah sein dem Yisei to Maimon Sinai. The intent of his words is to deny, is to object, is to the whole foundation of Maimon Sinai. As the Rebbe started to Moshe Rabbeinu und durch ihm gegeben ganz Torah leilam elam elam. The whole foundation of Maimon Sinai is that the Rebbe chose Moshe Rabbeinu and gave through Moshe Rabbeinu, gave to the Yidden the entire 613 mitzvahs, the complete Torah, which is eternal. And since the Maimon Sinai, as we explained at length, was authenticated for the Yidden through seeing and hearing the Nevuah of Moshe, says that the mitmachet Moshe. So if he goes up against the truth of Torah, he's going up against the Nevuah of Moshe. But if someone who doesn't say Moshe never taught this, he's saying that now it's time to change it. Moshe taught it, he was right, and it was all good, but now we have to change things. Or he wants to paskin halacha. He said, he's not denying the foundations of the whole Torah. And he's talking about one specific din in Torah. As late zayin nevuah is the din kach. That according to his prophecy, the din is like this. He could be right. He could be that what he said was true, that the Tommy is Tommy, the Torah is Torah. He's actually authenticating the din of Torah. However, how he's doing it is wrong. We're not saying that what he's saying is against Torah. How he's doing it is against Torah. The fact that he is coming to change something or to paskin is going against Torah lebeshamayim. When the Rebbe sagt, therefore the Rambam doesn't use the word lakish noas shomesha, nor lakish haTorah. Well, the yener is makish not a din von Torah, but nit Maimon Sinai, because the person who says that this doesn't apply anymore in this way, or he wants to paskin halacha, he's not denying the whole Torah. He's not denying Maimon Sinai. He's denying one din in Torah. Nor is he going up against the foundations of Torah, which were authenticated through the Nevuah of Moshe, which we saw and which we heard. And therefore the Rambam doesn't say Lakas Nevuah Shel Moshe, because Rambam only uses those words when the person is going up against the whole foundation of Torah and the whole foundation of Maimon Sinai. But a person comes and says, wants to paskin halacha, he might even be consistent with Torah. It's just that he's going up against the prat of Leiba Shemaimi, and therefore he's being makish Torah, therefore he's a Navi Sheker. But we don't use the word Lahakish Nevaseh Shel Moshe because this specific instance is not one that is going up against the whole Torah. And now we understand what the Rambam is trying to do. The Rambam is teaching us that the emunah that we have in Moshe Rabbeinu is not just an emunah in the fact that he was a Navi, but the fact that it happened at Maimon Sinai helps us authenticate in our minds the veracity of Torah, and therefore, even though Torah is really higher than Nevuah, but the Nevuah, because we have more access to it, we're able to appreciate it more, it actually helps us understand and believe in the truth of Torah.